and I love when she does that kind of split dichotomy. The Grammys don't though. That was too much. No, it wasn't. Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I just woke up from a nap and it's 1:30 in the morning. Safe to say I'm handling my first in-person dead week in over a year very well. I am having such a good time. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I post a ton of other Taylor Swift content as well as some story times and other lifestyle sort of things, and be sure to hit the notification bell down below so that you're notified every time I upload. And let's get into the video. So we have 10 album covers I will be ranking and analyzing today, including Fearless, Taylor's version. This was a requested video by Sim Equine, I think. Thank you so much for requesting. This just goes to show that if you request something, I will probably do it. I like posting unique kind of Taylor Swift content and not just reactions, and you guys help me out with that, so let me know down below what else you guys want to see. So my absolute favorite album cover by Taylor Swift is the 1989 cover. The main reason I think this is her best album cover is because her old label literally was like fighting her on the idea of having part of her head chopped off in the cover. I think it was a really bold move to make, and it kind of symbolizes that shift to the pop genre that she was doing that her old label also coincidentally didn't like. I think she was just intuitively doing something incredibly different, not just with the sound but with the look and the aesthetics of the album. The album still has her signature red lips, and that kind of set it in stone for her because it came around only just in the era previously. The sweatshirt that she's wearing also became iconic. I'm pretty sure there was merch. This album cover single-handedly revived the Polaroid industry. She changed the proportions a little bit to make it a perfect square, but I think it's a really symbolic way to capture her songwriting, because her songwriting does represent kind of capturing this unaltered moment in time. So I also want to talk about the handwriting on this album cover. It's so personalized and probably symbolizes the story that she was telling through these songs, particularly through the liner notes. She lost him, but she found herself, and somehow that was everything. She'd been known for putting secret messages in the songs up to this point, but this one felt like a whole plot going on, kind of. It just felt very personal. This album cover is also obviously playing into the 80s inspired pop music, which I think is really satisfying, that everything's like the same style across the board. Okay, so my second favorite album cover by Taylor Swift is Reputation. My favorite part about this one is that the text isn't a super defined and basic style like some of the albums before. Her name isn't obviously and clearly written on there. It's kind of off to the side, and it's in all these different styles and directions even, and the title isn't that big, and it's like off to the side. I also think the black and white of this album cover symbolizes this like newspaper idea of people writing about her when they don't really know her. The fact that there's her name written on only half of her face could show that this is the side of her that the media sees and tries to create this narrative out of her based on what they know. Then the blank side of her face symbolizes who she really is, which we get to see in like the second half of Reputation from a musical perspective. So something that I noticed that was kind of interesting was when you think about the Look What You Made Me Do music video, and there's that scene where she's in the bird cage while she's singing. People have analyzed that to mean kind of about how Big Machine, and she felt kind of trapped within that label. She felt like she was singing in a bird cage. I notice on the Reputation album cover, she has this super tight choker around her neck. It's incredibly uncomfortable looking. This might be another symbol for her old label strangling her in a metaphorical way. Keep in mind, Reputation was the last album she did not own. After this, she could move on, and I think this is a visual demonstration of her breaking point. The style of the Reputation album cover is also reminiscent of a mugshot. I think she felt really villainized by the media. A lot of lyrics on Reputation write from the perspective of this robber and kind of this Taylor Swift villain that the media created. Like, I'm a villain, okay, I'll show you the best damn villain you've ever seen. And I think the expression and pose and style sort of play into that. Also, of course, there's the edgy style that coordinates with the new sound that she's doing. There's the slicked back hair, the dark lipstick, the tattered shirt, and even the choker. And I like how there's not a lot of eyeliner here. You'd expect like a thick, smoky eye, but she's not doing that. What's funny is she did that kind of like in her Fearless days. Like in 2008, it was very much the thing to have smoky eyes and the thicker liner. She was playing around with that kind of look back in the 2008 scene days. I just did a photo shoot recreation of the Fearless aesthetic actually. The photos are up on my Instagram, but I did pay attention to how thickly she lined her eyes at the time, which she's not doing a whole lot of here, which is interesting. This is also one of the only album covers she's making eye contact in. She doesn't do that often, so I think when she does do that, it is very deliberate. And I think the reason she's doing that here is to just kind of confront and address her reputation head on. She said that she was making this really cathartic style of music, and she felt she needed to get that out of the way before she could write normal songs again. So for number 3 on this list, I chose the Folklore album cover. I love this one because she literally calls this style of music her folklorian woods, and I think this is a visual representation of that in a very obvious way. This album came out during the pandemic where people felt helpless and kind of like they did not have control over the situation. I think her looking incredibly tiny next to these trees is a representation of that. We are but a speck in the grand scheme of things. Even Taylor Swift is, and that both is comforting because even someone as successful and accomplished as her still feels small sometimes and is small. She's one person, and it gives her also this relatability in a subconscious way, and I think it's a really smart move. This one is also black and white like Reputation, but instead of it being the kind of black and white of an overexposed newspaper headline sort of way, it's very much in this kind of vintage way that's kind of reminiscent of 1989. She's going back in time a little bit in some of these songs, and I think she's trying to create something timeless, which goes wonderfully with black and white. It looks very classic, and it's the same colors as Reputation, but a completely different feeling. If you zoom in on the album cover, the expression on her face looks uncertain and almost a little bit concerned. This probably embodies hers and everyone else's in the world's feelings towards the situation. Things were spooky with the US election, the pandemic, etc. She's really pondering in this photo, and there's this embodied comfort in the uncertainty, and I think it's beautiful. Also, I know the clothes were either from her own wardrobe, or I think Stella McCartney might have given her some stuff. The fashion choices have a really personal style to it. The coat is so big that it like swallows her almost, and I think this is a symbol for her immersing herself in this coat, kind of how she's immersing herself in the fictional world of folklore. She's so small and covered in fabric in this cover because this album isn't necessarily about her. This might be one of those works that an artist thinks of as bigger than herself, like she's but a vessel for the amazing world of folklore. Number 4 on this list is Speak Now. This is also one of the few album covers that makes eye contact. I think the reason she's doing that here is because this album is incredibly bold. It's very autobiographical and follows the theme of speaking now and being brave even if your voice shakes. She's confronting the events in her life head on, not unlike the way she confronts the media head on in Reputation. I also love how this album cover is not a photograph, it's a painting, at least in part. I didn't know this until very recently, but looking at it closely, one of the dead giveaways is the strokes that make up her arm. Like, it very much looks like it was painted on there, as well as some of the folds in her dress. It's like an oil painting kind of. Her face is a little more clear though, so I think maybe this might be a combination of photography and art. I think this fusion represents the dreaminess of the album. This was her most fairy tale like album yet, even though Scott Borchetta made her change the title from Enchanted to Speak Now. She was still trying to go for that vibe. It's definitely still really princessy. It uses the color purple, which is associated with royalty. The script font also feels very princessy. This is more full-on castle-y, kingdom-y shit from Taylor Swift, no matter how hard Scott wanted it not to be. Then he goes and gets mad anyways when she does something completely different with 1989, so you can't win. The free movement of her twirling around in this dress, I think, represents how carefree this album is. A lot of lines in this album actually do mention dancing, and I think there's just a lot of freedom and self-expression in this cover, which there should be, as she had full control over everything that went into this album since she wrote every single song completely by herself. She had no other influence from like others' words, I guess. So it really is her speaking now. Like, the whole album just embodies that. So number 5 on my list is Fearless. This one is iconic and inspired so many copycat photos. I mean, just look at my icon. This embodied her first signature style with those corkscrew curls and the hair flipping that she did so much on the Fearless tour. The contrast is up really high on a lot of the Fearless promotional photos, and it's a really warm tint. Fearless is just a golden sort of era, and it really embodies 2008. And that time, as I said before, the thicker liner she does was really big then. She's wearing a key necklace in this photo, which was a huge fun trend at the time. I had a million of them from middle school. It's just such an embodiment of the time with how on trend this cover is. This album also has a carefree, self-expressive vibe, kind of like Speak Now. So this cover also has a lot of movement because of that. She's twirling in both of those album covers. And I think they're using a fan to get her hair to blow up like that, because trying to do the head twirl myself to achieve the same effect about wrecked my neck, but it was worth it. I feel like she stood there and they just let a fan do the work to get a perfect shot though. The font on this cover is really bold, like a lot of these songs were. I think that's about all I have to say on this one. I'm not noticing a whole lot. Let me know down below if you guys have a super in-depth analysis of the Fearless cover. I think it just visually embodies boldness and carefree vibes, kind of like Speak Now. So the next one on here, number 6, is Fearless Taylor's version. The reason this one is under the original one is because I like the way the windswept hair looks more when it's curly. I think that's just a huge symbol of the Fearless era, and I would have loved if she'd have curled her hair again for the recreation. But then again, the straight hair is like who she is now, and that's her conscious choice. I like that she's looking the other way in this one. She's quite literally turning the other cheek away from her past and putting her own spin on it. Some people have said the change in attire from the dress to the Romeo-esque puffy pirate shirt symbolizes how she's kind of saving herself now and her past works in a way. Also, just in differences between the two, this one's taken slightly at an angle a little bit below her chin, whereas the original is head on. Maybe it's because the industry now like bows down to her after all the iconic shit she did, or maybe I'm reading too far into this. Another difference between these two album covers is this one looks like it was taken outside. Maybe this could also represent how this album embodies her ability to finally break free from her old label. Being outside instead of in a studio feels more free. So number 7 is Lover. This one is a huge metaphor for all of the love of the album. I feel like Scott wouldn't have let her do this super romantic type of stuff. She literally named it Lover because, oops, Taylor Swift loves love. Like, are you surprised? The hot pink glitter script font also embodies this vibe, as well as the pink and blue and purple skies. They're all super romantic, but fun and youthful colors. It's not like a seductive kind of love, it's like a new love blossoming. The pink heart around her eye is also an iconic piece of style moment, signature look. I don't know what to call it, like the fearless hair or the red lips. The pink heart around the eye was also immensely recreated like those things. And I feel like this eye heart doesn't get enough attention. Like I don't see a whole lot of recreations, but it's the exact same color and glitter as the title on the album, and I think that's really cool. I noticed how she didn't put her name on this album cover, which is really interesting to me, and it's new for her. Maybe she feels like she doesn't even have to mark them anymore because she just owns them no matter what. Folklore and Evermore have also followed suit. The blue hair is also another just cohesive color sort of thing, I think. She sings about the color blue a lot as well in this album, so she could be personifying that with herself. So number 8 on this list is Red. I love the bold font, first of all. It's very classic and kind of vintage, reminiscent in the same way Folklore is. I think Folklore's cover is just a little more symbolically strong though. I do like the cohesive style of her hat because the hat is both very 2012 and has that modern look to it, but it's also something that's kind of vintage at the same time. She takes the best of both worlds with this record itself because she utilizes modern styles with songs like 22, We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, and I Knew You Were Trouble, and then she also utilizes retro styles with Starlights, The Lucky One, and even kind of like the older folk styles with I Almost Do or Sad, Beautiful, Tragic. I think there's a really nice mesh here of those two sounds. It's kind of like the way she mixed edginess with vulnerability on Reputation. This one is both retro as well as modern, and I love when she does that kind of split dichotomy. The fucking Grammys don't though. That was too much. No, it wasn't. So she puts a huge focus on her hair here because it's the first time she's leaning into this poppy symbol of the straighter hair. Another symbolic thing I think she did here is hiding her eyes and looking downwards because she's being kind of vulnerable with this and like letting us in a way. Songs like All Too Well make this obvious. It's a really intimate photograph for a really intimate album that just details such a personal heartbreak. There's a huge focus on the red lips here, probably being the most eye-catching part of the album cover, as well as the hair, because I think those two were the most changed aspects of her style since Speak Now. She also leans into establishing the red-lipped signature look with 1989, but she really focuses on it here with this close-up sort of cover. The 9th one on this list is Evermore. This one's only ranked so low because I think it's just a pretty basic looking continuation of Folklore. It's my favorite album, but my second to least favorite cover. I do like the added interest of the way she turned her back to the camera. It kind of symbolizes the second record and how she's now leaving the Folklorian woods to focus on her re-recordings. As we see, she does have some trees in front of her, but you can see bits of sky and land in between them, meaning that the forest is no longer as thick as it was with the Folklore cover, and she's almost out of the woods. The coat gives me some wintry detective sort of vibes, which is embodied on songs like No Body, No Crime. This style feels a little more put together, a little more deliberate. You know, we started getting the vaccine distributed by this point. Things seem a little more clear, the trees aren't so thick, there's an end in sight, and I think this cover is showing that. The coat is like a little more tailored to her body, and I think this is like a representation of how we're all a little less of a mess now. I will say this look is still pretty iconic, like Fearless was, because people recreated this album cover like crazy on Instagram. It's very simple and easy to do, so I think there's a smart marketing move there, if anything. And the 10th one and final album cover on this list is the Taylor Swift debut album. This is one of the few covers to be making eye contact. I think there's 3 of them: Reputation, Speak Now, and Taylor Swift. I think the reason they did this in this album cover is to introduce her to her audience. She's looking right at us so that we know her face and can recognize it when we see it in the future. The little butterflies and swirls on this album cover are so representative of 2006. It's like those notebook margin sort of sketches. I do like how bare this cover is. It's not overdone, it's just a really good introduction to a new artist. A lot of these photos are taken in the water, and I think that symbolizes this transparency and just the newness of a new artist. I think the back of the album had a photo where she had what looked like a heart tattooed on her foot, but I guess that never was a real tattoo because it disappeared. But you can bet I was recreating the shit out of it when I was 7 years old in 2006, drawing hearts on my foot with Sharpie. Did anyone else also write I heart question mark on the back of their hand? Because I absolutely. I think it's a really nice font choice because the font that she uses on this album cover became completely associated with Taylor Swift for so long, since that font I think was like rarely ever used by anyone else. The blurred background on this one makes me think of Red. It's simple but a bit less vulnerable and intimate. It's more just like a general introduction for her without diving incredibly deep yet, which I think was exactly what this album was. So yeah, that is my ranking and analyzation of all of the Taylor Swift album covers thus far. Let me know down below what your ranking is or what your interpretation is of any of these album covers. We're Swifties, we're known for reading into things, so I look forward to reading your comments. So give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next week, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye guys.